You're in a room full of people. The kind of room that hums with chatter and laughter, where everyone seems effortlessly connected. Like they all read the same script, and you somehow missed the rehearsal. You stand there, smiling when they smile, nodding at the right moments, laughing at the right beats, mimicking the rhythm of the crowd. But inside, it all feels strangely hollow, like you're playing a character in a play you didn't audition for. Every word you speak feels pre-approved. Every gesture feels rehearsed. You try to keep up, to mirror what's expected, but the mask you wear doesn't sit right. It's tight, suffocating. It was never made for your face. You've spent years trying to find your place, squeezing yourself into conversations, circles, environments that never really felt like home. You learned the language of small talk, the art of blending in. You tried to be quieter, louder, kinder, tougher, whatever version the moment seemed to demand. You bent yourself into shapes to be more palatable, more relatable, more acceptable. But no matter how much you morphed, the world never opened its arms in return. It smiled, maybe, but it never truly saw you. And maybe deep down you've always known, even before you had words for it. You sensed that you were different, that your mind worked in shadows and spirals, while the world moved in straight lines, that your heart heard whispers others ignored. You thought it was a problem, something to fix, something to grow out of. But what if it's not? What if the truth is simpler and more freeing? You don't belong. You never did. And maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe you were never meant to fit into the crowd, but to stand just outside of it, watching, questioning, understanding. Maybe your role isn't to follow the noise, but to echo the truths no one else dares to speak. Maybe your sense of isolation is not a defect, but a calling. Because what if belonging, as the world defines it, is overrated? They say it like a flaw, when in reality it's your fingerprint. Your depth is not dysfunction. Your intensity is not a defect. It's just that most people are fluent in small talk, and you crave soul talk. You want to get to the marrow of things. You want to ask why until the answer bleeds. You want connection that doesn't require performance. Conversations that don't evaporate the moment the room goes quiet. But in a world built for surface-level interactions, your desire for depth can feel like a burden. So, you learn to tuck it away, to laugh at the jokes that don't land, to nod in agreement when your spirit is screaming in protest, to mimic the rhythm of others just to keep the peace. And it works, for a while. You look like you belong. But deep down, there's always that ache, that quiet, relentless whisper. This isn't it. This isn't home. This isn't truth. And so, a new kind of loneliness grows. Not just the loneliness of being unseen, but the loneliness of seeing too much in a world that sees so little. You notice the cracks in people's smiles. You feel the tension behind their laughter. You sense the storm behind their silence. You read rooms like poems. You carry stories in your chest that were never yours to begin with. You feel like a lighthouse no one looks toward. Always lit, always watching, always alone. But what if this loneliness isn't a punishment? What if it's a calling? What if it's life's way of pulling you away from imitation and closer to originality? What if the very thing that makes you feel like an outsider is the seed of your real identity? Because let's be honest, the crowd rarely leads to clarity. Belonging, real belonging, doesn't come from changing yourself to match your surroundings. It comes from standing so firmly in your truth that the right people find you. So maybe, just maybe, your loneliness is sacred. Maybe it's proof that your soul hasn't settled, that you're still searching for something real, not because you're lost, but because you refuse to be found by the wrong things. And yes, the path is quiet. Yes, the nights are long. Yes, you will question everything. But in that questioning, in that refusal to play pretend, you carve a place for something greater. Not belonging, but becoming. Not applause, but alignment. Not attention, but authenticity. You feel like you don't belong, and maybe you never will in the way others do. But maybe that's not the curse. Maybe that's the invitation. To stop looking for mirrors and start becoming a lighthouse. To stop trying to fit in and start becoming a place where others like you can finally feel seen. Because your loneliness isn't emptiness. It's space. Space for something true to arrive. And when it does, it won't need to be explained. It will feel like home. The truth is, some people are wired differently. Their minds don't rest on the surface. They dig, they wander, they question. Philosophers, thinkers, artists, empaths, observers, these are the people who live life with their antennas up, constantly scanning the world for meaning. They can't help it. It's in their nature. While others are content with what is, they're consumed by what could be, what should be, and most importantly, what lies beneath. They notice the pauses between words. They sense the tension in a handshake. They recognize the lies people tell themselves just to make it through the day. They hear the silent screams behind polite smiles. To others, these things are invisible. But to someone wired like this, it's a constant flood of information. Emotional, philosophical, existential. And that's not always welcome. Because the world at large doesn't reward that kind of perception. Society prefers simplicity. It celebrates ease over complexity, familiarity over truth, comfort over confrontation. People want to be entertained, not challenged. They want answers that come quickly and don't require much thought. The depth that once defined wisdom has been replaced by convenience and algorithm-fed amusement. So when you ask why in a room full of people satisfied with because, you become a threat to their comfort. When you point out what others ignore, or when you express discomfort in shallow situations, you disrupt the illusion of harmony they've worked so hard to build. And for that, you get labeled intense, complicated, too much, too serious, too sensitive. You become the outlier, the ghost in a room full of bodies. Present, but not really there. Schopenhauer once said, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." And it's true. The deeper your understanding of life becomes, the stranger, more chaotic, and more alienating it can feel. The more you comprehend the structures of society, its illusions, its distractions, its denial, the more detached you become from it. It's like waking up in the middle of a dream and realizing everyone else is still asleep, still playing along. So you drift, not because you want to, but because you must. You become the outsider, not out of rebellion, but because the inner world you carry no longer aligns with the outer world you walk through. You become a stranger in familiar places, the black sheep in a field of conformity, the one who sees in a world that just wants to be seen. But this doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're wrong. On the contrary, it might mean you're the only one who's awake. You're not lost. You're just on a different road. And it's lonelier, yes. It's quieter. But it's also more real. Because to truly see the world, to strip away its masks and illusions, is a kind of painful enlightenment. It's the burden of depth, but it's also your gift. And even if they never understand you, even if you never quite belong, you belong to something greater, to truth, to wonder, to the rare few who see the same invisible world you do. Being misunderstood cuts deeper than most people realize. It's not just the pain of invisibility, it's the ache of distortion. When you're ignored, sure, it stings. But at least you know it's because they haven't really seen you. Being misunderstood, though, that's worse. Because they do see you. They just twist the image. They take fragments of who you are and reconstruct them into something false, something easier for them to comprehend. And that distortion is a quiet kind of violence. They call your silence arrogance, not knowing it comes from watching, thinking, feeling too much. They think your deep curiosity is rebellion, a challenge to their authority, when all you want is clarity, truth, meaning. They see your emotion and label it as fragility, weakness, when in reality, it's your strength. The raw, unfiltered ability to feel in a world that numbs itself to survive. So what do you do with that kind of pain? You hide. You start folding yourself into shapes that don't fit, just to make others comfortable. You dim your light, thinking maybe if you shrink enough, you'll finally blend in. You learn to say the right things, not the real things. You laugh at jokes that don't land in your soul. You nod through conversations that mean nothing. You trade authenticity for acceptance. And with every performance, you lose a piece of yourself. You become a master of masks, fluent in the language of pretending. Your true voice softens, fades, disappears beneath layers of persona. And one day, you glance in the mirror, and the person looking back feels like a stranger. The eyes are yours, but the fire is gone. You've spent so long adapting to everyone else's comfort zones that you no longer know your own. That is the cost of forced belonging. It's not just loneliness. It's not just weariness. It's the slow erosion of your essence. It's forgetting who you are because you were never allowed to be. But here's the twist no one tells you. The truth that society buries beneath slogans of fit in, be normal, blend seamlessly. You were never meant to belong. Not in the way the world defines it. Not in the way that demands you trade your authenticity for approval. You weren't built to disappear into crowds, to echo the noise, or to dance in sync with a parade of masks. That hollow belonging, the kind rooted in sameness and surface-level connection, was never your destiny. You were built for something rarer, something real. You were meant for truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it isolates you. You were meant for depth, the kind of soul-searching, truth-digging depth that makes others uncomfortable because it reveals everything they try to hide. Your design was never meant to comfort the crowd. It was meant to challenge it. Look at history. Every great mind that changed the world. Socrates, who questioned the very structure of Athenian life and paid with his life. Van Gogh, whose art bloomed in isolation and torment. Emily Dickinson, whose poems saw the human soul clearer than any of her peers, yet she rarely left her home. Nikola Tesla, a man so ahead of his time, the world didn't catch up until long after he was gone. They were all outsiders. Why? Because the world had no place for them. Their minds stretched beyond convention. Their hearts beat to a rhythm society couldn't hear. They didn't belong to their time or to their culture. And they didn't need to. They didn't exist to fit into what was. They existed to create what could be. And you, with your questions, your intensity, your solitude, your relentless search for something more, you carry that same spark, that same creative defiance, that same divine discomfort that whispers, "You're not like the others." And that's the point. You weren't meant to conform. You were meant to create, to think, to feel, to awaken. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to illuminate. And the road you walk may be lonelier, quieter, harder, but it is yours. And in a world that rewards imitation, walking your own path is the rarest kind of rebellion.